Alright, we're looking at this piece, and it kind of looks like it could be centered, but it's not. And also, it's definitely not level. So we got to mess around with this a little bit. And that's not a big deal, but it is a big deal enough to deal with it. So first thing I'm going to do is just pull it up, see if I can get it to tweak up. That looks pretty even. I'd say so, but not exactly centered. Well, I don't know. It's hard to tell. Maybe just a little bit over, and we will be centered. And a little bit up. I think that's about as good as it's going to get. Now we got to come back in and put these other pins in to support it, and it looks like they're going to fit just beautifully. And maybe one of them going to get ground down a little bit, but that's going to be okay. So we'll come back after a few minutes and see what we've got. Okay, we're going to start by brazing in the other two legs. And I'm guessing if this leg doesn't quite fit, but there's a lot of brass down there, and I'm guessing that as soon as we heat this brass up, that leg will just kind of drop right into place. Like it almost did, just right there. Almost there. Trying to get the brass to melt down at the bottom here. Any second now. There it goes. Starting to move right into place. That looks pretty good. Okay, let's do our third side. And our third side actually is going to it's going to need to be trimmed a little bit. So we'll come back to that, and we'll be back in a while. It's about more like 6 or 8 days later. I'm still dinking with this thing. Of course, I spent a bit of time doing other things. But I got this welded together, and I got this first joint welded right here, and this is all squared up and to the back side and to these and to the surface. We are working on welding up these two extra clips right here, and we will be doing that right now. Well, not welding them up, brazing them up, which is a much easier process, and in some ways just as strong. There we go. Now we're kind of coming up to a nice red temperature. I'm going to turn the light off so you can kind of see what temperature it gets to in order for the flux to flow, and then to get the braze to flow. And you want to have it up high because you really want the braze to flow, not just to clunk in there. There we go. Maybe a little bit more just for fun. Yeah, that's a good flow right there. Now what I'm going to do is go back and catch any places that that were a bit weak. And notice here, we're just a bit weak on this front side because it got just a bit too hot. So I'm going to kind of come back in and just add a little bit more now that it's cooled off just a little bit. There we go. Fill in that gap a little bit. And I think on this side we're looking pretty good. Alright, we'll just give it a break here and wait for things to cool off, then I'll inspect it and see if there's any places that are a bit iffy. Okay, we're going to let it cool, and then I'm going to put it in the acid and burn off, or not burn off, but melt off the flux off of this side, and then flip it over and put it back in the acid and melt off the flux off of that side. Mostly because my acid bucket is only about, or my acid depth is only about this deep, so we'll go from there. Stick with me. Okay, so we've got the cage done, and then Juan is going to come in and do the wiring around the cage to work with the generator itself. And the generator, you know, the whole setup is done. It's not bolted to the table, as you can see here, but we've got to get the cage in place first before I do that. Now, can you see anything wrong here? I didn't see it for a while. Look carefully. Yeah, exactly. How am I going to get the cage around the ball? So, and I've thought about it a bunch since this came up, and I realized, okay, well, what I can do is I can just take and saw each one of these little segments with a jeweler's saw, so I get a real thin kerf on the cut, and then take this apart, put it around the ball, and then braze it back together again. And you know, there won't be much of a change, and there will be it'll be hardly noticeable. So we're going to move forward with doing that. We're going to take it over to the vise, clamp it in the vise, get the jeweler's saw, and start sawing away. Okay, we got the cage clamped in the vise, and it's just barely holding it because, you know, I didn't want to tweak anything. With jewelers, you got to put a little bit of lubricant on there, and we use wax. In fact, that's wax from my bees. Anyhow, put a little wax on the blade, and you can see the blade is just like super narrow and super thin. And you know, I knew exactly where to get a jeweler's saw because turns out I've been a jeweler for 40 years, so that wasn't a hard process. So then it's just a matter of, without putting a lot of pressure on the blade itself, because, you know, of course it's a very thin blade, it'll just kind of work its way in there and cut right through. And probably at some point or another, because these blades are built to cut silver and gold, or, you know, softer metals, probably at some point we're going to have to come in and replace the blade. But it looks like it's cutting pretty good so far. We're just kind of working our way through here. And you can see how narrow that kerf is. It's, you know, maybe as thick as my fingernail. So it's going to have a nice reconnection joint there without too much of a problem. But you can see it doesn't take that long, and it's certainly not a big pain to do. And what it's going to give me is this real accurate reconnection. Almost through. Come on, baby. There it goes. Alright, let's see what... So it looks like we got a little spring on this. Once it kind of pushed through, it sprung. So I'm probably going to end up breaking the blade to get it out. Yeah, it sure feels like it. Well, maybe we can tighten it up down here a little bit, and it'll open it up. Nope. Let's see. Just kind of give it a little bit of a spring. you know, trying to save a 10-cent blade. There we go. Yeah, popped right through. Then I just open up the saw and take the blade out. Okay, so we got one. We'll go ahead and cut the other two and, you know, take a coffee break. Okay, we're almost all the way through. Now what I've done is I came in here, and I don't know if you can see this, but I've kind of put a couple of little center punch marks in there to indicate where I'm at in the rotation, because once this thing gets sawn all the way through, it's going to kind of fall apart and I'm not going to know where I was. So that'll give me that. And now we have to, in a sense, kind of fight this last little bit because it gets a little tweaky. There we go. And I almost made it all the way through all three of these without breaking a blade. But then when I was taking it out, and there, I broke a second blade. Well, that is exactly what happens. And I was going to be so proud of myself. Let me take a break and go get another blade. Blade replaced. Slide it in the groove. Now we're going to be a little more careful. And then as we get to the end here, oops, yeah, that blade loosened right up. Must not have had it tight enough. Okay, continuing. There we go. And as we get to the end, you hear the whole thing's gonna want to tweak a little bit, and it probably will break the blade again. But maybe I'll be able to get through it. We're almost through. Okay. Few more strokes and we're through. I'm having to be real gentle and light. There we go. And we didn't break the blade. Look at that. Okay, so we've got these opened up. When this goes back together, it's going to be a little bit off. You can kind of see it just a little bit off. But I think once we braze it back together, then I can come back in and just trim those down a little bit and smooth them in. So let's take it over and see how it's going to go around the armature. Okay, we got the armature here, and so basically what we have to do is kind of open everything up and get the armature loose, and then we'll just move everything back here. Come on. There we go. And put the cage around it. And put the armature back in place. Up on its little platforms. There we go. Oh yeah, well this has got to go in too, but we don't have to worry about that for right now. And then bring this around till these flats are down on the bottom. And we should have a good solid connection. I'd say that looks pretty good. So now what I need to do is I need to come in with a file and kind of clean up all of these joints before I weld this thing together, because once I weld it together, I'm not going to be able to get inside here and mess with those. So I want it to look nice. So we're going to take it back into the bench and start doing some file work and some grinding work and, you know, that sort of stuff. Take it apart. Just leave this part here for now. And let's go in the studio. Anyhow, since we're in autumn and everything is starting to cool off, I call this the warm part of my studio. So you can see there's little bubbles of brazing here, and the transition's not all that great, and the transition's not all that great there. Now normally when I work in this part of my bench, I'll open up the drawer and drop all of the gold or silver in these drawers. But since we're dealing with brass here, I'm going to just drop it straight onto the floor and not worry about it. So just basically coming in and roughing out these connections so that they have a nice transition. Over there. And we're going to just keep going around here and doing all this. So, you know, we'll take a break on the camera. Okay, we got ourselves over on the welding bench, and I think this is going to work out pretty well. I know we're sitting on a glass jar, but, you know, I'm going to be welding up here, so I don't think we're going to get hot down below. Take a little brazing rod, get our flux, strike up the band, the torch, and we just set these babies right back up where they belong. That's in good shape. They're just a little bit off because, of course, you've got the kerf of the saw blade. But we can get them pretty close. Fire up the torch again. And as I said, we don't have a whole lot to heat up here, so I'm going to keep this torch fairly low. And we're going to use some very, very thin rod, just so we don't have to deal with trying to get the rod to do its thing. Just heat it up a little bit. Drop some brazing in, maybe. There we go. Heat it from both sides just so it soaks through and the brazing pulls all the way through. That looks pretty good. Let's just rotate the whole thing. Do it again. A little more flux. Now with brazing, I always have an oxidized flame, which means that I have more oxygen in this mix than gas. And you can tell an oxidized flame by the intense blue in the center here. It's a real sharp-edged flame. Carbonized flame will have, it'll be kind of soft and have a little bit of yellow to it. And of course a neutral flame will be right in between. It won't be sharp and it won't have any yellow. Okay, we got one more, and then I think I want to redo this joint there because that thing looks a little slim to me. Just bring everybody up to temperature. Drop a little bit of solder or brazing in there. Heat it up. It's probably come in from the opposite side with this one. And pull that brazing through to the other side. There it goes. Now let's go ahead and bring this thing here. A little, give ourselves a little bit more brazing on this. And this is going to take just a little bit more heat, but not much. I mean, we're almost up to temperature now. There it is. Just add in just a tad. It probably would have been strong enough as it was, but it didn't look good. And for me, it's always about looks. Yeah, that's much better. Nice and filled in. Since we're here, hell, we may as well just fill that little baby in there because it's a little bit weak too. The key is not to get the flame down on the aluminum too much here. Yeah, just a little bit of fill in there. Come on. There it is. Yeah. Looks good. Okay, we're back in business. Okay, and while it's cooling, we just decided to come and slip the whole thing back together again and see what it looks like. And it looks like it's pretty well centered and ready to go. So basically at this point, we're at the place where I just need to bolt these 3 brackets down, and then I'm ready to send it to them. So I'm guessing you know, another day or so, maybe a little bit of polish work and clean the things up a bit, but another day or so and we'll have this thing ready to ship it off to them.